Hello, and welcome to my channel. Today, I wanted to share the story of how I became Lutheran and why I don't think I could leave. Now, before we get into the story, let me make a few things very clear. I am not an expert in theology by any means. I simply enjoy learning about theology because I think that it can deepen my relationship with God. I like to know the why behind things. So theology gives me the ability to answer those questions. I like to think of myself as somebody with a fairly analytical mind, and I have always felt drawn to big existential questions about life. I am constantly searching for truth, and that search first led me to Christianity and later specifically to Lutheranism. The primary purpose of this video is to share my story, how I came to believe, and why I later became convinced that Lutheranism was where I belonged. Maybe my perspective will help somebody who is also inquiring about the faith or Christianity in general, or just wants to understand why somebody would even choose Lutheranism. Because I myself watched a lot of videos and I listened to a lot of people's stories during my journey, and I think that it helped me a lot. So this is kind of my way of giving back to that. Maybe this could help somebody. So let's get into my story. I didn't become Lutheran because I had read all of Martin Luther's works or had memorized the Augsburg Confession, and after careful consideration of every single Christian denomination that exists, came to an informed theological decision. I wish I could say that's what happened, but it wasn't. In fact, it was pretty much an accident, or at least that's what it seemed like at first. I was raised in a Christian household. I say that for lack of a better description, because while I was raised believing in God, I didn't go to church very often on Sundays, and we didn't really read the Bible at home. Nonetheless, I was baptized as a young toddler in the Eastern Orthodox Church due to my mother's heritage. But beyond that, I had very little ties with the Orthodox Church at all. I did, however, go to kids' church during the week at an evangelical church in my hometown, as well as VBS, Vacation Bible School. Best time of my life, best summers ever. I love that. I looked forward to it every single year, and I was always so upset that it would only be a few days long. I am very grateful for those experiences because they gave me my first real exposure to Christianity in a way that was accessible and understandable for me as a child. I was very genuine. I loved memorizing Bible verses and listening to stories from Scripture, but looking back, I realized that my faith was very surface level. Then again, what do you really expect from a 5, 6, 7-year-old? Strangely enough, I do miss that childlike faith at times. It was naive, for sure, but it was genuine. I believed what I was being taught, I loved Jesus, I loved God, and I didn't feel the need to have an answer to every question. Time went on, and my family moved to a different country. This was a very difficult period for me. I had trouble adjusting to my new surroundings, and on top of that, all the changes that you go through when you enter adolescence. And little by little, I drifted away from my faith to the point that I came to see religion as something that simply wasn't worth my time, and I thought it was just something made up and irrational. At the same time, I became very interested in science. I was very good at math. I got high grades, and unfortunately that started to get a bit to my head. I began watching atheists online who would usually just mock religion, specifically Christianity, and I thought I was becoming so rational and so intellectual for subscribing to these ideas that were floating around in that community. So I felt very sophisticated. What I didn't realize at the time was that I wasn't just becoming neutral about reality or about religion. I was simply adopting a different worldview. Science itself wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had turned my confidence in science into something much deeper. I basically made it an idol. I treated it as an ultimate explanation for reality, and I developed this attitude that I knew better than all of those religious folk. Looking back, my atheism was teenage angst mixed in with intellectual arrogance and deep-seated insecurity. I was a perfectionist, still kind of am, and I felt like I had to constantly prove myself. So I attached a huge part of my identity to my grades and to my academic success. But at the same time, I struggled with some very big questions about existence. And ironically, those questions started to undermine my atheism. Because science could tell me a lot about how things work. It could explain processes, mechanisms, relationships, but it didn't have the answer to the question, why? Why does anything exist at all? Does human life have any meaning? Any objective meaning? Something that is outside ourselves? What happens when we die? Is there objective good and evil? And if so, where do we get that objective standard from? So I couldn't bring myself to accept that death was simply the end, and that there was no ultimate meaning to existence, and that human beings were ultimately just the accidental products of an indifferent universe. It led me to some very bleak conclusions, and eventually I became less certain about my atheism. I wouldn't say that I suddenly became a believer like that. It was much more gradual. I became agnostic. I started to wonder whether perhaps maybe there was something beyond us, beyond the material world, something that science by its nature couldn't explain. And the more I thought about the universe, the more fascinated I became by it. There was an extraordinary order to the world, an intelligibility that allowed me to investigate it through mathematics and through science. And at the same time, there were these enormous questions as to why the universe exists at all, and why it has these very particular characteristics that allow life and consciousness to even exist. So I simply couldn't dismiss the possibility of God anymore as some irrational belief. And at some point, I came to the conclusion that belief in an intelligent creator was not only possible, but intellectually compelling and more honest to me. So that was the beginning of my journey back towards Christianity. Not much happened for the next few years. I don't particularly remember what I was thinking at the time. There were a few points when I considered becoming Eastern Orthodox, because I was baptized in Eastern Orthodoxy, and also it was the most popular religion where I was. But I do have disagreements with Eastern Orthodoxy on a number of theological points, which I won't be getting into in this video because it's going to be long enough already. At the time, though, I was still searching. I knew I believed in God, but I hadn't figured out what I believed about Christianity and if I even belonged within it. Fast forward a couple years, I accidentally discovered that my city had a historic Lutheran church. Now, I really had no idea what Lutherans believed. I knew they were quite different from the Eastern Orthodox churches that I had visited, while also seeming closer to my evangelical upbringing. Both those things immediately sparked my curiosity. So, one random Saturday evening in June, a thought popped into my head. Hey, maybe I should go check that church out. Looking back, it was such a random thought, and I don't think I normally would have acted on it, because, you have a lot of different thoughts. But for some reason, this time felt different. And I was very motivated to go. I checked out when the service times were the next day, and I went. I remember being fascinated by the way the church felt. High ceilings, white walls, a big crucifix right above the altar, rows of pews, hymn books with centuries-old hymns, and an actual organ accompanying the service. I felt very at home almost immediately, even though I knew nobody there. The congregation singing together made me feel like I was in such a holy place, and the fact that I was able to join in made me feel like I was a part of something so much bigger than myself. The combination of reverence and structure in the liturgy, the simplicity of the aesthetics, and the sermon all came together in a way that made me feel at peace for the first time in I don't know how long. And almost ironically, I recall that the gospel reading and the sermon message were about the parable of the prodigal son. What a coincidence, huh? A few months later, I started attending confirmation classes, and that's where I learned that I knew next to nothing about Christianity. Like, zero, compared to what I thought I knew. I'm being completely serious. I thought I had it all down. I thought I knew what Christians believed, even though I hadn't really even done much research at all. I just still had this attitude that I thought I knew everything. If you're not familiar with Luther's Small Catechism, it is this very short booklet that goes over the basics of the Christian faith. The 10 Commandments, the Apostles' Creed, Lord's Prayer, as well as the sacraments, Holy Baptism, Holy Communion, and Confession. In Luther's day, when most families didn't own a Bible or really even understand what they believed or why, Luther compiled the Small Catechism as a simple and accessible teaching tool for the regular Christian. As time went on, the more I read my Bible and attended weekly services, the more I realized just how little I actually knew, and how many misconceptions I had about Christianity. Honestly, that was very, very humbling. Pretty soon I was confirmed in the Lutheran Church, and I have remained there ever since. To kind of sum up this part of the story, I encountered Lutheranism pretty much by accident. Nobody in my family was Lutheran. I hadn't studied Lutheranism much before I started attending the church. I simply absorbed the knowledge week by week, sermon by sermon, as time passed, and as I did my own study. There's only one Lutheran church where I live, compared to the dozens of low church Protestant and Eastern Orthodox churches. So if you had told me beforehand that I would eventually become Lutheran, I probably wouldn't have believed you. The odds certainly weren't in favor of it. And yet, by God's grace, I did. This concludes part 1 of 2. This video is already long enough, so I decided it would be better to split it into 2 halves, so that my story would be a little bit more digestible. In part 2, I'll get into the deeper theological reasons behind why I chose to remain Lutheran, how after looking beyond my initial impressions and studying the faith more carefully, I became increasingly convinced that I couldn't, in good conscience, belong to any other tradition. I want to be clear that I'm not trying to argue that the Lutheran Church is the only true church, or anything like that. This ultimately is just a story about my own journey and why I've come to believe what I believe. I also don't believe in coincidences. There's a verse from Proverbs that I think captured this part of my story particularly well. The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. There were so many circumstances, many of which I haven't even gone into, that brought me to where I am today. Looking back on them, I can come to no other conclusion than that the Holy Spirit was guiding me, whether I realized it at the time or not. I thought I had found a church by accident. I didn't yet realize that I was about to find a theology that I couldn't walk away from. I'll see you in part 2.